Yes,
Yes,
Prabhu.
Prabhu.
Okay. Dr. Madhaprabhu, you're kindly also engaged in working with Nathan Blatz for the service.
Little service, Prabhu, not much. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you guys hear and see me okay?
Yes, Prabhu.
Okay. So you can see the Veda base, Srimad Bhagavatam 1.13.23. Yes.
Yes, Prabhu. Yes, Prabhu, we can see.
Okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayana Namaskritam Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayadudire Nashtaprayasha Patreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhakti Bhavati Naishaki Krishnaya Vasudevaya Devaki Nandanaya Cha Nanda Gopa Kumaraya Govindaya Namo Namaha Shruta Swakata Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtanam So, dear devotees, thank you for joining us today on this very auspicious occasion of Shri Gaur Purnima, Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Ki Jai. So, I'm going to some other video. Okay. So, I'm going to go ahead and start with this, and let me know if there's technical issues. Nothing was Prabhu or with the Mother Prabhu. Okay.
Sure, Prabhu.
Okay. We'll read the verse, we'll read the purport, and then discuss. Aho Mahayasi Jato Jivata Ashayata Bhavan Bhima Pavarjatam Pindam Adati Griha Pava. Aho Mahayashi Jato Jivata Ashayata Bhavan Bhima Pavarjatam Pindam Adati Griha Pava. Aho Mahayashi Aho Mahayashi Jantur Jivat Asha Yata Bhavan Bhima Pavarjatam Pindam Adati Graha Pavat. Anybody like to repeat?
I can try, Prabhu.
Sure.
Aho mahiyasi jantur yatha bhavan bhima parjitam pindam adatte griha prapalavat.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Hare
Hare Krishna.
Aho Mahiyashi Jantor Jivitasha Yata Bhavan Bhima Pavarjitam Pindam Adate Grihapalavat.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna,
Anyone?
Prabhu.
Hare
Yeah.
Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Jai Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Aho mahatyasya jantur jivitasha yatah bhavan bhima pavarjitam pindam adate graha palavat. Hare
Thank you,
Krishna.
Ray. Thank you, Vijayalakshmi. Would anybody else like to? We're reading, some of you joined. Yes,
Hare
please.
Krishna Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Aho mahiyasi jantur jivitasha yata bhavan bhima pavarjitam pindam adate grihapalavat.
Thank you, Dhanraj.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Anyone else? Sacinandana Mataji, are you trying to speak? I can't hear you.
Hare Krishna. Can you hear me now,
Krishna.
Prabhu?
Yes, that's it. Would you like to
Aho,
read the verse? Thank you.
yes, Prabhu. Aho masyasi janto jivitasa yata bhavan bhima pavarchitam pindam adate graha palavat. Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you. Thank you. Sacinandana Mataji.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Jai.
Aho
Hare Krishna, Jai.
mahishyasi jantor jivitasha yata bhavan bhima pavarjitam pindam adatte graha palavat.
Thank you, Janet. So I think we've had everybody repeat the words of in the Bhagavatam. So let's do the synonyms. Aho, alas, Mahiyasi, powerful, Janto, of the living beings, Jivita, Asha, hope for life, Yataha, as much as, Bhavan, you are, Bhima, of Bhimshena, a brother of Yudhishthir's, Apavarjitam, remnants, Pindam, foodstuff, Adati, eaten by, Graha Palava, like a household dog. Translation by His Divine Grace, Alas, how powerful are the hopes of living being to continue his life. Verily, you are living just like a household dog and are eating remnants of food given by pain. Pretty powerful, strong statements. Purport by His Divine Grace. A sadhu should never flatter kings or rich men to live comfortably at their cost. The sadhu is to speak to the householders about the naked truth of life, so that they may come to their senses about the precarious life of material existence. Dhritarashtra is a typical example of an attached old man in household life. He had become a pauper in the true sense, yet he wanted to live comfortably in the house of the Pandavas, of whom Bhim especially is mentioned because personally he killed two prominent sons of Dhritarashtra, namely Duryodhana and Dushaj. These two sons were very much dear to him for their notorious and nefarious activities, and Bhim is particularly pointed out because he killed these two pet or favorite sons. Why was Dhritarashtra living there at the house of the Pandavas? Because he wanted to continue his life comfortably, even at the risk of all humiliation. Vidurji, therefore, is astonished at how powerful is the urge to continue life. The sense of continuing one's life indicates that the living being is eternally a living being, entity, does not want to change his bodily habitation. The foolish man does not know that a particular term of bodily existence is awarded to him to undergo a term of imprisonment, and the human body is awarded after many, many births and deaths, the chance for self-realization to go back home, back to Godhead. But persons like the Dhritarashtra try to make plans to live comfortably there in a comfortable position with profit and interest, for they do not see things as they are. They do not see things as they are. Their thoughts is blind and continues to hope to live comfortably in the midst of all kinds of reverses. Of life. Sadhu, like Shivaduji, is meant to awaken such blind persons and thus help them to go back to Godhead, where life is eternal. Once going there, no one wants to come back to this material world of miseries. We can just imagine how responsible and task is entrusted to a sadhu like Mahatma. Aho Mahayasi Janto Jivata Ashayata Bhavan Bhima Parvatitam Pindam Dalti Grahapalam. Translation: Alas, how powerful are the hopes of the living being to continue his life. Verily, you are living just like a household dog and are eating remnants of food given by Bhima. We go to the chapters. Om Agyantimirandasya Janat Vinananan Janat Agyantam Salakya Chakshurmutam Hina Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manabeshtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupam Kadamayam Tadati Swapatantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavam Cham Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatham Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvitam Sadhutam Vijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Tanamane Namaste Saraswate Devi Gauravani Pacharane Nirvisheshunyavadi Pashtataya Vishatarane. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpati Gopisha Gopi Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishvanu Sutta Devi Pranami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Tribhyascha Kripa Sindhuvi Vacha Patitanam Pavnebhyo Vaishnavyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Devasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Shri Bhagavatam Ki Jai. So very strong continuation of some pretty powerful words by Mahatma Vidur to activate Ashtra. Alas, how powerful are the hopes of a living being to continue to live his life. Verily, you are living just like a household dog and eating remnants of food given by people. So Srila Prabhupada says, a sadhu should never flatter kings or rich men to live comfortably at their cost. A sadhu is to speak to the householders about the naked truth of life so that they can come to their senses about the precarious life and material existence. So Srila Prabhupada very strongly states that we are overtaken by temporary engagements and become foolishly misdirected in those engagements, completely forgetting our prime purpose in life as parts of Swayam Bhagavan Krishna. So in this verse, we see Shri Vidurji is chastising Dhritarashtra very strongly with piercing words so that he can cut off his attachment, Dhritarashtra's attachment to a kingdom which he's already lost. Aho Mahayasi Jantu Jivatsa. Alas, how powerful are the hopes of a living being to continue his life. So in the absence of real understanding about the real help rendered by these words, it seems very strong and harsh treatment of a person who's already beaten down to the ground by most of everything in his life. So we have to understand the perspective from which the sadhu is speaking. Srila Prabhupada goes on to say that Dhritarashtra is a typical example of an attached old man in household life. He became a pauper. A pauper means bankrupt person in the true sense. So here, Vidurji explains that by saying, Adate graha palava, that you're like a household dog. So Vidurji is accusing Dhritarashtra that he's simply sitting at the palace, having no occupation, but watching it like the dog watches the master's property. Dhritarashtra had lost everything, but was very happy to hear Yudhishthira Maharaj refer to him as, like, O king, O Raja. King, O Raja. He was so much attached to this position. How could he tolerate being called a Graha Palavat? Graha Palavat. So it's very humiliating for somebody who views themselves as a king. Thus, to enable to get Dhritarashtra out of his complacency and awaken his misdirected intelligence and understand his true position, Bhagavan Krishna arranges for a much needed jolt in his and our lives when this kind of stuff happens. Srila Prabhupada goes on to say, yet so by calling him Grantlavat, he's accusing him like a household dog who's watching over the kingdom. Here he says, Srila Prabhupada says, yet the Dhritarashtra wanted to live comfortably in the house of the Pandavas, of whom Bhima especially is mentioned, because Bhima personally killed two prominent sons of Dhritarashtra, namely Duryodhana and Dushasana. These two sons are very much dear to Dhritarashtra, were their bad, notorious activities in Bhima in particular. Like it was pointed out, because he killed these two favorite sons. So here, Mahatma Vidur, touching on the point that would hurt Krishna even more. So he first called him a household dog, and now he's saying you're eating, a parvrajtam pindam. You're eating Bhima parvrajam pindam. You're eating the food, the Mahaprasakam of Bhima. So at the end of the great Kurukshetra battle, Dhritarashtra was overcome with grief and rage. Of course, the loss of so many, all of his sons, 100 sons. And so when he met the Pandavas who had come to see Mahabharata, you can read about this, when the Pandavas in their humility approached Dhritarashtra to seek his blessings before they would join, they would take up the throne, he embraced them all. When it was Bhimsen's turn to embrace the Dhritarashtra, Bhagavan Krishna knew what Dhritarashtra, that although he was blind, due to the blessings of Sri Vyasadeva, his father, he possessed the strength of 100,000 elephants, is what Mahabharata states. So Lord Krishna instructed Bhimsen in not verbally, but by giving sign language, like people do for deaf people. That their pastor would not be aware of the instruction. And Lord Krishna told Bhima, move yourself to the side and push forward an iron statue that has been carved in the palace in remembrance of your glory, and push that iron statue into Dhritarashtra's embrace. So that's what Bhimsen did. And Dhritarashtra thought that the man who he was embracing was Bhimsen, who had killed several of his sons, including his beloved Duryodhana. So what was within Dhritarashtra's heart came out in such powerful anger that he embraced the statue and he crushed it into powder. So you can, by that act, one can understand Dhritarashtra's, in his heart, having a lot of enmity towards Bhimsen. So that's why that was a second insult, or second jab at Dhritarashtra that was given by Mahatma Vidur. Srila Prabhupada goes on to say, why was Dhritarashtra living there at the house of the Pandavas? Because he wanted to continue his life comfortably, even at the risk of all humiliation. So being complacent and being happy within a comfort zone is a disease that most everybody suffers from. And in such cases, a shock treatment may be required to bring us out of this complacency. Srimad Bhagavatam describes this later on here, this verse in the pastimes of Sri Lord Ramchandraji in Canto 9, chapter 10, verse 14. It says, "O all-pervading Supreme Person, we are dull-minded." Dull-minded is Jiva Dhiyo, Jada Dhiyo, Jada Dhiyo. We're dull-minded and did not understand who you are, but now we understand you as a Supreme Person. So this dull-minded means our intelligence is covered or stunned. So Srila Prabhupada writes in this purport, the Jada Dhiya refers to intelligence like that of an animal. A person with such intelligence cannot understand the Supreme Person Godhead. Without being beaten, an animal cannot understand the purpose of a man. Similarly, those who are dull-minded cannot understand the Supreme Personality Godhead, but when punished severely by the modes of material nature, they begin to understand Him. So we're seeing Vidurji's mentioning this. Vidurji, therefore, was astonished at how powerful is the urge to continue life. This sense of continuing one's life indicates that a living being is eternally a living entity and does not want to change his bodily habitation. The foolish man does not know that a particular time of bodily existence is awarded to him to undergo a term of imprisonment in the human body is awarded many, many births and deaths as a chance of self-realization to go back home to Godhead. So this is why, the Bhagavatam kind of repeatedly puts out these statements of kind of like warnings. This is repeated again in instructions in Canto 11, chapter 26. An intelligent person should therefore reject all bad association and instead take up saintly devotees whose words cut off excessive attachment to one's mind. So the point that's being made by Srila Prabhupada and these verses from Canto 9 and 11 is that one has to very thoughtfully get into the association of saintly personalities to weaken our illusory bonds to that which is temporary and our sentiments that are not based on reality, right? Not based on reality. But persons like Dhritarashtra try to make plans to live their uncomfortable position with profit and interest, but they do not see things as they are. Dhritarashtra is blind and continues to hope to live comfortably in the midst of all reversals of life. So, when one gets distressed, one goes to a place of worship, a temple or church, to approach and worship the Lord. But when one gets opulence, one forgets Bhagavan. Therefore, punishment by Bhagavan through material nature is necessary in human society, because without it, we forget Bhagavan's supremacy due to our jadadhiya, our dull intelligence. And this kind of jolting or shock-like strong treatment can come in many forms. And that's why sometimes strong words used by a sadhu like Mahatma Vidura can have great impact and push the posture and our own selves out of complacency. And that's why the verse we read in the 11th canto, it said, intelligent person should therefore reject all bad association, instead take up the association of saintly devotees, whose words cut off excessive attachment to one's mind. So it continues, a sadhu like Vidur is meant to awaken such blind persons and thus help them back to Godhead, where life is eternal. So there's well, continue. Once going there, no one wants to come back home to the material world of miseries. We can just imagine how responsible a task is entrusted to sadhu like Mahatma Vidura. So, this is pretty powerful, strong, disruptive statements being made. First by calling him a household dog, then one who's taking remnants of the human saints, Mahaprasadam, etc. So there's a fable, an Indian folk tale about this kind of thing. And once there was a person in a village who loved to eat mangoes. Who doesn't like mangoes? So one day he decided to get the sweetest mango. The sweetest mango, for most people who've lived in mango orchards, knows that the mango will usually become sweetest at the very top of the tree because it's getting exposed to the sun, and so it ripens very nicely. So the man climbed up to the top of this very tall tree, and the branches, of course, thin out when we go further and further up a tree. So he managed to get up to the very top and pick some of those very sweet mango fruits. They're very red. But in trying to come back down, he slipped and started falling towards the ground. Fortunately for him, he caught a branch. And as he was falling, he remained helplessly hanging on the tree because the branch was not right above the ground. So what does one do when one is helpless? One calls out to others. So he started calling to the nearby villagers, help, help, help. And they came with, ladders and sticks. But unfortunately, the branch was too high for them to actually get to it. So after some time went by, this man is struggling up in a mid-level branch, which is precarious for his situation. A very thoughtful person who was known to be the head of the village, a kind of sadhu-like personality, man of few words, came from his very simple hut nearby. And so everybody started looking at him and saying, okay, this man is very wise. How is he going to solve this problem for a man with some mangoes in his hand and hanging on to a branch? So the sadhu-like person was silent for a little time. And then he picked up a stone and he threw it, hitting the hanging man. And everyone was surprised. And everyone standing on the ground was like, wait, what? He's such a peaceful man. What's he doing? And then the man on the tree holding the branch said, what are you doing? Are you a crazy fellow? Want me to break my neck? The sadhu remained silent. Then he took another stone and threw it so that he hit the man again. This time the man got not just perplexed but angry. He said, if I can just come down to the ground, I'm going to show you, what's what. But everybody wanted him to come down to the ground, but nobody knew how. And some of the onlookers were upset at the sadhu, but they didn't say anything. And then the sadhu picked up another stone and he threw it even harder at the man. And the man got so angry that he developed a great determination, that, okay, I'm going to come down and get revenge from this fellow. So he used all his skill and strength, to somehow manage to reach the bigger branches and safely climb down. And he made it. Everybody was, all onlookers were amazed. And so the man came down and said, where's that sadhu? Where's that sadhu? I need to tell him what's what. And put him in his position. And the onlookers in the village said, well, he's a wise man, so he didn't wait for you to beat him. And the man said, well, I'm going to get a hold of him and take it out on him. And then the onlooking villager said, well, wait a minute. He's out of all of us. We had good intentions and compassions. We couldn't help you, but he's the one who helped you by provoking you. And he induced you to help yourself. At that point, that man who was trying to get mangoes thought and said, yeah, you're right. All your good intentions and your compassion didn't help me one bit. But that's how to induce me to do my best and save myself. I should be thankful rather than angry. So yeah, this is the way saintly personalities help us in our lives. We have to take responsibility. The Guruji is telling that to the Dhritarashtra. You have to take responsibility for your own elevation. But sometimes, when a push is necessary, and that's what Srila Prabhupada says, we can just imagine how responsible a task is entrusted to a sadhu like Vidur, because that's just Guruji's brother. He doesn't want to say these cruel things to the Dhritarashtra, but he's trying to encourage him to elevate his own soul and get rid of the null-minded intelligence, right? So this is, of course, the Dhritarashtra's statement, Guruji's statement to his good brother Dhritarashtra, but we should understand what this means to us. Bhagavatam is meant for our instruction. And so Guruji spoke to Yudhishthira Maharaj and gave different type of news. He didn't speak things that were hurtful. In the Dhritarashtra, he spoke strong things. The purpose was different. So I want to speak about how in our own lives, not just the Dhritarashtra, but in our lives, how comfort breeds complacency. So I was looking up the meaning of complacency in various dictionaries, and the Webster Dictionary says Complacency is self-satisfaction. I mean, they give many definitions, but one is self-satisfaction, especially when accompanied by unawareness of actual dangers or deficiencies. Self-satisfaction, especially when accompanied by unawareness of actual dangers or deficiencies. In the Darsha case, it's evident that Darsha is getting older and he's living in a place that's not made for him. And so he's complacent because of the comfort zone of being in the palace and being treated like a king, even though he wasn't. So in our path in devotion life, bhakti, it is well known that adversity is a challenge. But surprisingly, prosperity can be even greater challenge. Because misery can threaten our faith, but pleasure can deaden our purpose, our sense of purpose. And there's a nice example of this in Sri Ramayana through the story of Sugriv. I think all of you have heard and read Ramayana, so I don't, there's nobody here, I think, who isn't familiar with the Ramayana. So Sugriv had been exiled by his more powerful brother, Bali, due to a misunderstanding. And I won't get into that for the sake of time, but I'm trying to illustrate the point. So during this exile, despite all of his attempts at reconnecting with his Bali, they had failed. So he formed an alliance with Shiram, Sugriv did, who himself had been exiled from Ayodhya's kingdom through the manipulation of his stepmothers. So, but Sri Ramchandraji helped Sugriva regain the kingdom. In return, Sugriv promised to help Ramchandraji find Mother Sita Devi and reunite them. So that was happily accepted by Sri Ramchandraji. And so by the time Sugriv was made a king, the Ramayana explains that Barsat, the rainy season, started, and that can go for several months. And during that time, traveling is very difficult. Most of you that have been raised in India know that. So they agreed between Sri Ramchandraji and Sugriv. There was a mutual understanding that they will need to wait for that rains to end. And Sugriv, being a very kind host, invited Sri Ramchandraji and Lakshmanji to come stay at the palace in Kishkinda, the kingdom of the Banners, the Mukhas. But Sri Ramchandraji wanted to remain firm in his vow, right? He was very firm. His vow was that he would live 14 years, not in the comfort of the palace, but in the forest. So he stayed outside the kingdom and remained true to his vow, to his father. So during that rainy period that lasted several months, however, Sugriv lost himself in the pleasures and comforts of a palace. And he forgot his promise to Sri Ramchandraji. It wasn't intentionally done, but when he found so many opulence and comforts, whereas previously he was living a life of running away from his brother and hiding out in places, so obviously he was uncomfortable. He'd been deprived of all that. He fell for the comforts. And eventually the rains ended, and Sri Ramchandraji found no sign of Sugriva making any arrangement to search for Mother Sita, or even coming to discuss what are going to be the arrangements with Sri Ramchandraji. So Sri Ramchandraji was disturbed. And so he asked us, of course he's Bhagwan, so this is a test for instruction. So then he asked Sri Lakshmanji to go to Kishkinda, because Sri Ramchandraji and Sri Lakshmanji were outside the kingdom of Kishkinda. So Lakshman did as requested. And Lakshman himself, can sometimes get angry pretty fast and pretty furious, and nobody wants to, kind of take that on. As we see. So he started going towards the kingdom of Kishkinda, the palace, with a lot of anger. Sugriv's, forgetful, ingratitude to what Ramchandraji had made happen. And by the time the Brahman describes that he came into the palace, he was boiling over in anger, furious. And when Sugriv saw him, he realized the seriousness of the situation. He snapped out of the comfort zone and ordered all his greatest monkeys, the most powerful, to go in all directions and start searching for Sita Devi. When Sri Lakshmanji heard about Sugriv taking these actions, his anger calmed down. And, the alliance between Sri Ramchandra and Sugriv was restored. So this is very instructive to us, this pastime of Sugriv, and also the pastime of Vitarshta. Because when, temptation or comforts come in a subtle way, not in like a forceful way, but subtle way, becomes easy to resist them. Another example in Ramayana is Ravan, before the battle of Lanka, sent messengers to Sugriv saying, hey, the Vanaras, the monkeys, and the Rakshasas, they don't have any enmity. They're not buddies, but they're not enemies. And he said, if you agree to withdraw from the battle, then I can give you some suitable promises for your pulling out of the alliance with Sri Ramchandraji. At that time, Sugriv strongly refused that enticement by Ravan and said, since Sugriv had become a close associate and friends of Sri Ramchandraji, then he cannot accept Ravan's proposal. So very angrily he said that. So here we see that he angrily rejects prosperity. Sugriv does, when it comes in a strong, obvious manner. So that's just demonstrating that when comforts and temptation come in subtle manners, we can more easily forget that our purpose. And to highlight this, Queen Kunti in chapter 8 of Canto 1 says, Vipaday Santu Tat Sasva. Let there be calamities again and again. The opposite of comfort, right? And at that point, the Pandavas were the head of the entire Bharatvarsha. But Queen Kunti is praying for calamities, the opposite of comfort zone. Why? Because it will allow her to get deeper into the shelter of Shri Krishna Bhagavan. But in Sugriv's case, we can see that pastime of residing in the palace after a long exile impacted his sense of purpose because of heavenly pleasures that he received in that kingdom. So our devotion is the takeaway message is our devotion is tested not just by adversity, but also by prosperity. And sometimes when we face obstacles, we may get a thought like, why is Bhagavan letting this happen to me? Why, when I'm trying to be sincerely devoted to him? And that's a natural question for a devotee, at least one is wise enough to ask that question. But at a higher level of thought, we should see misery as confirmation that the nature of material existence should strive to push us to take greater shelter of Bhagavan. That miseries, when they come into one's life, can at one gross level tell us that, this material place is no place for a gentleman or a gentlewoman. But at a deeper level, to instruct us to take deeper shelter of the Lord. And for those that are very advanced, that's a natural, almost done reflexively action. And so adversity and difficulty and strong words being used by Atmavidya can be an impulsive force for deepening devotion. Whereas prosperity can have a subtle, more kind of wearing down effect of our devotion. We may initially be grateful to Bhagavan for giving us all these future comforts, that remembering that we got them, but as time goes by, that we got them through his mercy. But as time goes by, we continue to live comfortably materially, and we may forget that prosperity is a gift from Bhagavan himself. And we see this more in the modern day world of, life has become more complex. And we live in urban societies, big cities, surrounded by lots of technology, which are products of mankind, not necessarily gifts from Bhagavan. So now, one should not be like an extremist. The problem is not the presence of technology. The problem is absence of God consciousness because of infatuation with the comfort, the technology, and urban living, and that sense of entanglement that gives us. So God, has been pushed away in modern society, not just physically, but also intellectually because of our lifestyles. And a good example of that is like the weapons that were used in Kurukshetra and the weapons that Arjuna used, etc., reminded those great warriors of the divine reality where the phenomenal power of those weapons originated. And indeed, those weapons were activated, they're lit through purification and invocation of mantras. And so it reminded the warrior that one is dependent on being much greater than oneself. Whereas today's life situation, kind of dulls us into a sense of that we're God. We have overall control, that by clicking buttons, we can, on computers and machines, we can achieve what we want. And then we think that this urban technological paradise is a substitute for the spiritual world. But while we temporarily control our surroundings and external things, we find that ourselves, we're becoming increasingly unable in this society to control the world within us by any button that we press on any machine. We can maybe control things outside of us, but we're not able to control by pressing buttons, but we're not able to control things within us by pressing buttons. Our minds, our emotions are becoming increasingly disturbed. You can see this. Dr. Martin Luther King, in one of his very wonderful speeches, said, the means by which we have lived outdistanced the ends for which we live. Our scientific power has outrun our spiritual power. I really like this quote. We have guided missiles and misguided men. The means by which we live have outdistanced the ends for which we live. Our scientific power has outrun our spiritual power. We have guided missiles and misguided men. Dr. Martin Luther King, his hero was Mahatma Gandhi, and he was a deeply spiritual man. A very famous quote that I saw in a water fountain in San Francisco, very kind of quiet, subtle, hidden away place. They had a quote on the wall that was carved that I dream of a world where people are judged not by the color of their skin, but the content of their character. So, comforts erode our devotion. subtly. Most of us who are committed bhakti practice, would reject, something obvious that comes in the form of temptation or comfort. But comfort, very rarely attacks us in that kind of strong manner. It doesn't reject God, a comfortable life. It just pushes God further down in our priority list of things that are important. And therefore it changes the center of our heart. And initially as devotees, we may acquire, a bigger house. And I'm not saying there's something wrong with that. Bigger house, nicer clothes, nicer car, nicer jobs, as resources for the sake of service of Bhagavan. And we might even use them initially for that purpose, but gradually the nature of such comforts is to indulge more and more in them, so much so that our original purpose is forgotten. Like Sugriva's example. Not because we had bad intent, but because of sudden nature of such comforts, just like in Tasha's life, erode our devotional purpose by increasing comfort. So that God, we know that God exists, but maybe it doesn't matter as much. Why do I need him anymore? We forget that whatever abilities or resources we have, internally, externally, come through Bhagwan's allowance. God's will is, Prabhupada says, God's will is a fact. Whereas our will only become a fact if God allows it. And to the extent that we realize that we receive these benefits from the mercy of Bhagavan and for the purpose of serving Bhagavan, to the extent that helps us. Because Bhakti is not trying to reject the world, but Bhakti is focusing on something else. Like connect everything, Yukta Vairagya, connect everything to its source. Material object, so Prabhupada says, used for the purpose of spirit becomes spiritual. So we should see comforts and the resources of the world as things to be used in service of God. And this is not just, some sort of psychological mumbo jumbo, but we understand that material and spiritual, everything in existence comes from Bhagavan and is connected to him, through his divine energies. Devi is a good amount. So we're not thinking of the world as illusion or entanglement. We're instead are thinking that we are surrounded by the mercy of Bhagavan and the gifts that he has given. And Sugriva's example, Sugriva realized that it was by Sri Ramchandraji's arrangement that he gained the kingdom of Kishkinda. So literally everything that he was receiving was Sri Ram's allowance to him. So, so we should see our comforts as God's gifts rather than sources of temptation, illusion. And we should feel inspired to serve Bhagavan better. Let me intensify and increase my service to him and use all of my resources, material and financial, to spread his glory and intensify my remembrance, my smarana of him in my heart. So to do that, when one is deeply embedded in that comfort zone, like the Dashta, one needs spiritual association. It is a vital purpose here. A sadhu like Vidur is meant to awaken blind persons and bring them back to God, where life is eternal. We can just imagine how responsible their task is entrusted to some. And to the extent we keep ourselves into that devotional extent, association of saintly personalities, and that we hear those messages in that manner. So to that extent, we will be safe. We won't be caught by material, but we'll see the material to fulfill the will of the Spirit and keep ourselves fixed in Him. That is the ultimate comfort zone, because it will not go away with time, unlike all material comfort zones will. And create that sense of gratitude and acting, not just something emotional, but something actually acting. That will help us. Srila Prabhupada used to say, give this one life to Krishna. Give this one life to Krishna. So how does one do that? It occurs through challenges, and growing pains, readjustments in our circumstances, our desires, and our progression. We have to, what Srila Prabhupada is saying, we have to remain by saying, give this one life to Krishna. He's saying we have to be committed to doing what is required to remain on the path of bhakti with a lifetime of devotion. Because success in life doesn't come from what happens to us, but what we do with what happens to us. I repeat, success in life doesn't come from what happens to us, but what we do with what happens to us, which means who we are, who our essential nature is, who my sense of myself is. Despite our shortcomings, there's much reciprocation from Krishna. We just have to carefully keep Krishna in mind and avoid a critical mentality. And be surrounded by the mercy of Shri Guru and sadhus in our life, the wonderful devotees in our life, and so on, Bhagavan Krishna. And in the long run, this one life will be given to Krishna. So, and that understanding that there are stages in our development of our, not just spiritual, but our material life that can encourage us to persevere in spite of the back and forth currents that flow into life and to bhakti. So we need support and association that are relevant to us. We are one on our journey towards Krishna. So my main takeaway from this verse is complacency, comfort zone creates complacency. And the purpose of the sadhu is to help us come out of such a comfort zone and understand that the blessings that we're receiving are also a gift from Krishna, just like the adversities are a gift from Krishna. And that if we use them sincerely for Krishna's benefit and for the progression for bhakti, then like Dr. Martin Luther King said, the means by which we live have outdistanced the ends for which we live. The means by which we live have outdistanced the ends for which we live. Our scientific power has outrun our spiritual power. We have guided missiles controlled by misguided men. There's so much more to say, but the main point is comfort zone creates complacency. And we need to understand that the gifts of comfort zone need to help us to awaken or reignite our forward movement towards Krishna. And understand that reciprocation occurs both in comfort zones and in adversity, as demonstrated by this situation with Darsha and this prayer by Kunti, where she says, let these calamities come again so I can remember you. Okay. We have time for corrections, reflections, comments. Thank you very much for tolerating this discussion. Discussion. Questions or comments?
Hare Krishna, Jai Sacinandana Prabhu. Thank you so much for the class, and pardon for the sound. I'm outside.
No problem.
I appreciated very much the analogy or the fable that you told. Even though we hear from Srila Prabhupada that it's not the business of the sadhu to speak flattering words, it isn't so clear as to why they would speak harsh words until you said the fable. I have a question regarding what's you said something about it's important not to be attached to the mind, and I appreciated that. And I guess what's a practical way that we can be alerted to when our mind is misguiding us in devotional service? It can sometimes sound like such a familiar voice. So what's one way to be alerted to when we're being deviated by the mind?
Well, I think it's to understand the nature of the mind, which is a material creation. And the nature of the mind is raga dvesh, attachment and like and dislike. And so Bhagavad Gita continuously, Sri Krishna Bhagavan. Well, first of all, Dhanaraj Prabhu, thank you for joining us from LA, and thank you for your nice question. I will try to address it. So Bhagavad Gita talks about the challenge of raga and dvesh, ichha dveshas, muktina. Desire, like, dislike, friend, enemy, happiness, distress, hot, cold. That it indicates that this is the nature of our mind. And what's the instruction? The instruction throughout Gita for that is tolerance. One must practice tolerance. So, one can artificially practice tolerance, but that won't work, because then it becomes more of a rules and regulations sort of game. So one has to connect with the happiness of bhakti and find a greater pleasure. Like Bhujan Prabhu says in his, the Japa book, the one with the picture, go over there in the front. He says in there, understand that the nature of mind is to pull us away from devotional life. And that's why most people find japa to be the most difficult practice. Because we can give a lecture and our false ego can be present. We can do deity dressing and our false ego can be present. Nobody will see it. We can cook prasadam, false ego will be present. Nobody can see it. We can manage, and false ego can be present. People generally will not perceive it. But in japa, it's just us, the holy name, and the mind. So in the practice of japa, one will see when the mind is active, because the mind will come up with other plans. Maybe I should have done this yesterday, or maybe later on this day, I can plan for this once this is done. So I think one can understand the mind, because the presence of the mind when one is going through these dualities, like, dislike, happiness, distress, based on not necessarily what is the purpose of the soul, what is the nature of the soul, but based on what my temporary desires are. Because if you just write down, some people advise you to write down, one should write down what the mind tells us during japa, so that we can kind of say, okay, calm down, mind, my dear mind, I'll address it after the japa session. A lot of practitioners say when they do that, they're like, wait a minute, that idea in my mind was just stupid. It's irrelevant. No matter. I've come up with a different, better idea now that I japa's done. So I think recognizing that the nature of the japa, the mind is not discrimination. That's what intelligence does. But rather, the nature of the mind is to keep us entrapped into the material condition. And the instruction that Krishna Bhagavan gives Arjuna is be be tolerant. And that's why Mahaprabhu himself says, in Trinada Pisunechanam, that one must be tolerant like a tree, accepting the reversals that are occurring in life and just remain fixed in a mood of humility. So, do you want to add more from your experience?
Thank you so much, Prabhuji. My experience is that I needed that guidance. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Anyone else have questions, comments, additions?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, Dandasana.
Krishna
So very
Janaki.
beautiful class. Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Very beautiful class, Prabhuji. Um, you hit on the point that how complacency it can be dangerous in the path of bhakti, and you mentioned about the Kunti Maharani's statement on her prayers that give him more suffering, so that
Yeah.
I feel more closer to you. So yeah, in this line of thought, I just remember this verse that I recently heard. That is from Brahmaji's prayer, the 10 compounds.
Yes.
So I'm sure yeah, that's like a a formula for devotees to handle difficult situations. So
Yeah.
I'm sure you have a lot of things to say on that. So I just wanted to mention.
Yeah, that's also very important verse. We spoke about suffering because in our Bhagavatam Saturday morning discussion group, we are reading chapter 6 where Naraji describes the beginning of his life and how at the age of 5 his mother walked out in the forest and was bitten by a snake and passed away, and how he considered that the mercy of Bhagwan. And then at that time he abandoned other shelters and went through the forest chanting the holy name. So yeah, such circumstances force us out of our comfort zone, basically. And yes, you're correct. And Pujan Prabhu, has talked about this idea quite nicely in one of his lectures. Great devotees like Kunti Maharani can say, "Let those calamities come again and again." One has to know one's own strength. Um, we're not asking for, we're not masochists or sadists where we inflict deliberate pain or want deliberate pain. She's coming from a level of realization that, we don't have. It's like the statement of, where with the 6 Goswamis, it talks about Shri Das and surviving on a handful of buttermilk every day. And if we attempt to imitate that or follow that, our body may not rebel against that sort of an austerity that we're trying to do. So we have to, I think, be mindful of what we ask. Is it based on our internal reality and our capability? So Bhujan Prabhu says that one should be real with where one is. Can I handle such suffering and challenges? Is it going to, the ultimate litmus test is what I'm asking for. Will it bring me the artha of my life, which is praying bhakti? Or will it cause just my mind to kind of dwell in disturbances? But yeah, thank you for pointing out that very important verse from what Brahmaji's prayers. And Any other comments or questions?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare
Thank you.
Krishna.
Insightful session, reminding about the misconceptions of Dhritarashtra, who is not only physically but mentally and spiritually blind. And I mean, thank you for wonderful examples and reminding us about the responsibility of a great sadhu like Vidura. And I really like the quotes from MLK, especially on the content of the, I mean, color of the skin and the content of the character.
Character. Yes. I really
Thank
like the where our scientific power has overrun our spiritual power. And we have guided missiles and misguided men. And remember, this was in the 1960s, when the Cold War was really raging between Russia and US. Yeah, he's a very sincere spiritualist for sure. Okay, I guess it's 9:08. I don't want to keep people waiting. Today is Gaur Purnima, and I look forward to seeing you all at the temple. Devotees will be doing services at the temple, I think starting around noon or so you can come and help out if you have that ability or desire. The program, as you know from emails, will start later with Abhishek and culture program and Kirtan and all of that. Okay. Vanchakalpatrubhyascha kapavsindabhya evacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavyo namo namaha. His divine grace shall I see Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada ki jai, Swami Bhagavan Shri Krishna Bhagavan ki jai. Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namnai Gvarita Sevima. Thank you, dear devotees. Hope to see you.
Hi, Prabhuji. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you. Dhanraj Prabhu, I presume you'll be going to get some association at LA Temple since you're residing there now?
Yes. Yes.
Nice.
I'm
nice.
walking into Sadhu Sangha now, or into sadhana now with the devotees in Long
Okay.
Beach, and I'll be going up to Los Angeles later.
Great. Have a great corporate evening. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Likewise. Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
Vijay
you.
Lakshmi.